Hello, I'm Diane, and last year I built a tiny bookcase and filled it with tiny books. This was kind of a solution to my occasional desire to have a large book collection, but also the impracticality of me having a large book collection. I don't tend to lend out books, I don't really reread books, so for me, collecting all of my favorite books, even if it is just my favorite books, feels a little bit silly and impractical just because I'm buying copies of books that no one's ever going to read probably. And also, I like tiny things. I think they're cute. So my solution to sometimes wanting a large book collection but knowing that that's not really a good fit for my life is to make this tiny bookshelf and fill it with tiny books. Then I can have all of my favorite books and it doesn't matter that you can't read them because no one's ever going to read them anyway, probably. And while I really enjoyed making that project and I really love the way it turned out, it kind of just made me want more tiny things. I thought maybe I'll build a whole library room around this bookcase, and then maybe I'll build a tiny kitchen, and then maybe I'll combine them and make a tiny cabin. So I made a tiny cabin. I measured out one of the shelves in my office to make sure that this would fit onto one shelf because that's where I wanted it to live when it was finished. And I made that original bookcase out of some leftover plywood from a different project. And I still had some of that plywood, so that's what I continued to work with. And I built this, which doesn't look like much right now, but I really wanted a complete cabin, so I had to build a full exterior that opened up. But I wanted the opening to take up as little space as possible because it would mostly be open living on my shelf. It's still not really finished, but this is a pretty complete shell of what it's going to be. I painted it with just some leftover wall paint that we had from painting the rooms before. I built some placeholder furniture. I don't think the furniture came out especially well. There is much more detailed furniture out in the world that I'll probably collect once I decide to do that, once I'm probably done with the book part and the actual cabin itself. I'll get some nicer looking furniture, but this works just as well for now, just using what I had on hand. And I made the floors look like hardwood floors, just using craft sticks or popsicle sticks. I built this little ladder out of wooden skewers. And as you can see in the back, there's almost an entire wall full of shelves that I can fill with tiny books. The other reason I made this smaller is because I was originally working in 1/6 scale, not really on purpose, that's just what scale I wound up in. And that's not an uncommon scale in miniatures, but while I was doing my research and planning the dimensions of this cabin, I found that it was certainly not the most popular. The most popular was 1/12, which was half the size I was originally working in, which worked out because if I do want to buy nicer looking miniature things in the future, more detailed pieces, there are a lot more available at much more affordable prices in 1/12 scale because it's so widely used than in 1/6 scale. But that also means that I have to remake all of the books that I had previously made because I originally made them this size and now they're going to be about this size. So I'm hoping they still look as good. I feel like the covers came out pretty easy to see on these. Even the spines are pretty readable. I don't know if you can read that. But once they'll be even tinier, I'm hoping they'll still keep the same amount of detail while just being even smaller and cuter. This project took probably more planning than actual build time, just figuring out how to size all the pieces, how to cut everything, figuring out that front piece to make sure that it actually opened and closed correctly. I think that was the least necessary piece on the whole cabin, but also the most difficult to figure out because it was a moving part. I do also want to add a little fireplace, which means I'm going to put a chimney on the outside, but I think the exterior is going to be the last thing I do. I want to finish kind of the inside, put a little fireplace, put all the books, which is the whole point of this project. Probably add some more details to the walls, put something in this little loft space here. We got some plans to keep adding on to this, making it a bit more detailed, look a little nicer, replacing some of the placeholder things that I put in there, and filling up those shelves with lots of books, which I'm in the process of making now. So while this isn't finished, I did want to share what point I'm in this process because I am really excited about it. I think it's turning out really well. It's pretty much exactly how I wanted it to look. And it was just a lot of fun to be able to make this thing and have exactly the miniature cabin that I wanted for my shelves rather than trying to find one that fit perfectly. As big of a book collection as I want with all of my favorite books that I've ever read without taking up all of the space in my house. Certainly not a necessary item, but a much more fun and practical way for me to build a book collection. I think it's really cool when people have really large book collections of all the books they've read. I just don't think that works for me in my life, but this does. So I'm really happy with the way this is turning out. I'll probably do the next update when I do all of the books on how this is going, and then maybe a bit more of the process once I do other things. I do still have some of my actual favorite books in physical form on a real bookshelf that is life-size, but this is a lot more fun for me to have this weird creative project that I can combine my love of building things and books, and it's tiny and adorable. So that's all for me today. Let me know if you collect books or miniatures or maybe both. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.